Welcome back. So I'm not really going to talk a lot in this video because there's not really much to talk about, but this video and the next are very important because right now you're probably just piecing things together about the whole way that we use CSS. Now we've had to use a couple properties here and there, but you probably don't actually know what these brackets do or how selectors work or how any of this is actually put together. So that's what I'm going to be doing in the next few videos, is explaining how all of this comes together. And once we learn that, we can actually move on to the fun part, which is using CSS and styling this website. So first thing I want to explain is properties. Now, we've talked a little bit about properties here and there because we've needed them to demonstrate points on how selectors work. Now, obviously, it might have been better if we used properties first, but in my opinion, it's better that you learn selectors before you learn properties, because if you learn selectors first, you'll be able to understand the premise or the theory behind CSS and how things work. Whereas if you just learn properties first, then most of your focus will be on how the properties work and not the selectors. And I feel that it's much more important that you learn the selectors before the properties so that you can actually understand CSS and how it works as a whole. So that aside, let's move on to properties. Now, like I said, we've used these a little bit in the past, but we haven't actually talked about them in detail. So this is a property. Now, they're contained within selectors and they pretty much define the way that CSS is used or what goes into the CSS. Now, a selector is going to target the element, but the actual properties are what give it its change and what make it what it is. Without properties, then the selectors would be completely useless. So let's go ahead and talk about the parts of properties. Now, first of all, a colon is always needed. You cannot use a property without a colon and a semicolon. The colon comes after the property. Now, the property is pretty much defining what is going to change. Is it the color, the background, the positioning, the height, the width? There are so many properties out there, and they are all used in different ways. And then next is the value. Now, most of the time you can actually use multiple types of values, but for something like color, there are very specific rules that you need to use for them, and we're actually going to be learning those rules and how to use colors in the next section. But for now, just think of the value as a key, or well, not a key. The value is sort of the guideline towards the property. The value is like the value to the attribute. The attribute defines what's changing, and the value actually gives it that change. So just keep that in mind. So that's pretty much it for properties. It's very simple, and we're going to get lots of exposure to them as we move through the course. But for now, all you need to keep in mind is that properties have two components. The actual property itself, which is kind of the guideline on what's changing, followed by a colon, and then the value itself, which is going to be the change or the type of change that happens in our element. So what happens through our selector. And at the end of it all, you always put a semicolon. If we remove the semicolon, it's not going to work. So yeah, that's pretty much it for properties. Let's move on.